of the Lynchburg City School Board is called to order. The first order of business is the certification of the closed meeting. The Lynchburg City School Board certifies that in the closed meeting just concluded, nothing was discussed except the matters specifically identified in the motion to convene in a closed meeting and lawfully permitted to be so discussed under the provisions of the Freedom of Information Act cited in that motion. I need a motion for the certification?
So moved.
A second? I have a motion and a second. We have to do vote by roll call for this certification. Mrs. Evans?
Yes.
Dr. Brennan?
Yes.
Mrs. Carter?
Yes.
Dr. Coleman?
Yes.
Yes. Dr. Nilles?
Yes.
Ms. Mason?
Yes.
So, with that, will we please stand for the Pledge of Allegiance? Before we go into the public comment part of our agenda, I would like to welcome our two school representatives to their first board meeting. From Heritage High School, we have Sedora Booker, and from Easy Glass High School, we have Maggie Kicklater. Welcome, and we're so glad to have you here. And you'll have a chance to speak in a little while if you have something to add. Okay. The next agenda item, public comments. In accordance with policy BDDH, public participation, the school board welcomes requests and comments as established in the guidelines within the policy. I need to read the statement. Persons appearing before the school board will not be allowed to campaign for public office or promote private business ventures and should not use profanity or vulgar language or gestures, make comments about a public official or an employee that are not related to his or her official duties, engage in behavior that disrupts the meeting or intimidates others, or address the school board on issues that do not concern the services, policies, roles, and/or responsibility of the school board. Individual speakers shall limit their comments to 3 minutes. A speaker representing a group shall limit his or her comments to 5 minutes. The representative shall identify the group at the beginning of his or her presentation. A group may have no more than one spokesperson. The total allotted time for public comments at school board meetings is 30 minutes. Public comments are reserved for the public to provide input. The board does not respond to comments, answer questions, or otherwise engage in discussions at this time. And we have two individuals signed up to speak tonight, and they're representing group. And the first is Wendy Yates, representing Teachers with a Voice.
United with a Voice, and good evening. Thank you for the opportunity to speak to you tonight. We recognize that there is new leadership and new presence on the school board, and we want to make sure everyone is aware of what we have been presenting to the school board for the last year and a half. We are here tonight to once again focus our attention on the inequities in the salary scale. We first want to take a minute to thank Dr. Edwards for her Reinvest plan that includes improving teacher salaries. We are also appreciative of everything that Carl Luce and the LEA is doing in this process. The goal of this group, however, is to focus on the inequities we see in the salaries for steps 12 to 32, with steps 23 to 32 taking top priority. Our group has provided an outline for tonight's presentation and a packet of charts for you to look at later since there is so much to cover. To recap past presentations, we have been comparing what a teacher today makes compared to someone at their step 11 years ago in 2008-2009. Two other important facts: teachers at step 12 to 22 are now earning almost 3% less than someone at the same step 11 years ago. Teachers at steps 23 to 32 are making almost 12% less than someone at the same step 11 years ago. Raises that are made across the scale do not meet the needs of these neglected groups. It is imperative that we start with these steps first, 23 to 32, and then second, look at 12 to 22 when we are looking at increasing salaries. I personally, as well as many of my colleagues and friends, would have been better off if the pay scale would have been completely frozen in 2008, 2009. We understand there was a recession, but in 2012 we also had to start paying the 5% VRS retirement contribution out of our salary. The value of our money has lessened while cost of living has still increased far beyond our raises. Step 29, which was once the top of the scale, has seen a 1% decrease each year instead of any kind of increase. If I had continued to be paid according to the pay scale of 2008-2009, I would now have $45,000 more than I do today. This is going backward from a normal cost of living increase, not to mention the increased pay for more years of service. That has not happened since 2008. Even more discouraging is that the top-year teacher, now step 39, is making roughly $71,000. This is $17,000 more than a 29-year teacher, which used to be the top for many years. Yet a beginning teacher is only $15,000 less than step 29. In the last 30-year history of LCS since I started, the top of the scale was never above that 29 years until 2009, when the scale started sliding down each year and every year until today. So think about those of us who had taught for almost 20 years, thinking we would reach the top of the scale at 29 years. Now, 11 years later, many of us are there, and we are below the median pay scale span for an LCS teacher. Will we ever reach the top, or will it just keep going up and up and up? If it keeps going like it has for the last 11 years, we will continue to get closer to new teacher pay and farther away from the highest teacher pay. Will we ever be rewarded for our years of service, and will we attract new teachers? Next, I would like to address additional money we should have earned. And you'll remember I mentioned in 2008, if the scale would have frozen, I would have had $45,000 more today, and that's not considering the cost of living. That's an average of a little more than $4,000 lost per year for step 29. Because of the scale continued to slide down, step 39 has continued to increase over the last 11 years, and they've had about $53,000 more dollars with a $5,000 more per year average. Did you hear the difference in those steps, 29 and 39? This is almost a $100,000 difference between the two steps in 11 years, yet 29 used to be the top. Why is it that those of us in the middle years who have stayed dedicated to teaching and Lynchburg City Schools have taken the brunt of the city's financial crisis? I would like to end with two thoughts. First, the state of Virginia has passed a 3% increase for teachers. Will we ever see that? And shouldn't we be given that this year? Second, I want to reiterate something Mr. Meadows mentioned last year. We would never have considered hiring a new superintendent on a 2008-2009 pay scale, 2008-2009 pay scale for that new position, but yet we have done that for years 23 to 32. We are below that scale. We're below the 2008 scale. What incentives do new teachers have to stay in teaching? Please address these iniquities with steps 23 to 32 immediately. Then steps 12 to 22, not even raises across the scale. We're excited about the new changes, and I thank you for this opportunity.
Okay, our next speaker, Mr. Luce.
Just the mic here. Well, good evening to all of you, and as always, thank you for your service to the youth of Lynchburg, and thank you also for the opportunity to speak tonight. For those of you who may not know, my name is Carl Luce, and I am the president of the Lynchburg Education Association. I'm sure that the experienced members of the board can tell you why I'm here without me having to utter another word. We have lots of challenges and issues that we need to work on together to benefit the more than 8,000 students who walk through our doors each and every day. Issues like assessments for students, the new sick leave policy, furthering employee education, and more. We also have building and HVAC concerns as staff and students are currently working in rooms that are 80 degrees or more. But the issue that we all know stands at the forefront is staff compensation. 2 years ago, as I stood in front of you as a newly elected president of the LEA, I brought the dire situation of low staff pay, low staff morale, and a high staff turnover rate to your attention. Last year, we brought that message to the community and to the city council. We have had acknowledgments that our staff pay is a problem. We have had acknowledgments that people on the board and on the council are willing to support increased pay for staff. What we need now is action. We are entering year 12 of what was sold to employees as a temporary step scale freeze. We see surrounding counties like next door in Bedford and in the Valley taking the lead away from Lynchburg by returning their employees to step scales, and we know it's well past time for Lynchburg City Schools to unfreeze its scale. Now is the time to take action. There's Medicaid money flowing into the localities now, and the governor is looking to possibly increase the 3% raise for SOQ positions to 4% for next year. Now is the time to take action. The division has worked with the LEA on a variety of different pay scales for all employees, and we welcome the opportunity to work with them again for a plan to be put into the budget as item number 1, because now is the time to take action. So I stand before you today to make this point very clear. The Lynchburg Education Association will actively lobby against any budget that does not restore the step scale for all employees, because the time to take action is now. Thank you.
Next, we have a special presentation on federally calculated SOL results. Dr. Edwards?
Yep. And coming to the podium is Dr. Bruce, who will take us through the presentation.
On August 22nd, the Virginia Department of Education released federal pass rates to the public. Tonight, I'm going to share a summary of those results with you and explain a little bit about our calculation systems related to SOL testing. There are currently 2 separate systems for school accountability: the state accreditation system, which is the one that we're pretty familiar with, and also the federal system. The federal results are always released first, and about a month later, this year, September 27th, we will get the state accreditation results. Both of those accountability systems are based on the results of standards of learning tests, and there are some major differences. I won't go into a lot of the state side of it, but I did just want to point out that even this year is even a little bit more complicated because we've got an old system of accreditation and a new system of accreditation that we'll be sharing with you all probably at the next board meeting. Schools can be accredited either on the old system or the new system. And the old system is just the pass rates that we've had for years and years. And then the new system for accreditation is actually an attempt to merge the accreditation system at the state level with the federal system, which looks at subgroups and graduation and completion index and things like that. So we'll talk a lot more about the state systems. Those results will not be out until September 27th. For the federal pass rates, there are subgroups that are looked at, and those are, the subgroups are all students: Asian, Black, Hispanic, White, students with disabilities, and English learners. These are the scores that you will see on the Virginia Department of Education school quality profiles and on the Virginia Department of Education website. That's what was released on August 22nd. There are fewer adjustments, and oftentimes the scores for federal pass rates appear to be lower than those that are state calculated, and I'll go into that a little bit as well. Keep in mind that the results I share tonight have nothing to do with accreditation. These are federally calculated scores. So when I said adjustments are made to scores, when students take tests, on the state side there are quite a few, and you can see by the check boxes going down through that column, there are quite a few adjustments that are made to the scores. And for the federal side, there's only a couple that are made. An example would be a student that transfers into Lynchburg City Schools in December and in May, early May, late April, takes an SOL test. They have not been with us most of the school year. However, they come in and they take our SOL test. At the state level, if those students fail, those scores are excluded. At the federal level, those count. So that's just one example of the adjustments that are made. Another one would be a student who speaks no English but has been in the U.S. For, let's say, a year and a half. If that student fails an SOL test, that counts on the federal side, but it would not count on the state side. They actually ignore those scores if they're failing. So we know that it takes sometimes students that have not been exposed to the English language, it takes them longer than a year or so to master the language to be able to take SOL tests. So those are just a couple of examples of how scores are adjusted. And again, our state scores that you will see in at the next meeting will be quite higher than the federal scores due to a lot of these adjustments you see up there. Additional considerations that we'll have with federal accountability. You all probably are used to hearing about priority schools and focus schools. That has been changed this year. They are now being called comprehensive support and improvement. That's for the lowest 5% of Title I schools that are out there. And then targeted support and improvement are for schools that have low performing subgroups. The federal accountability with the federal accountability rates, which are different than federal pass rates. Again, there are always differences in numbers. Those numbers that they use for federal accountability have a couple of adjustments in there, makes them a little bit different than what you see on the website, but they will give a designation to schools if they fall into one of those two categories listed there, the comprehensive support and improvement and the targeted support and improvement. We don't anticipate any of our schools being there this year, which is great news. We will not know that for sure until September 27th. So we'll continue to wait and see. This type of accountability that has sanctions related to it is just looking at math and reading achievement, just those two tests. Another thing to consider with federal testing, we have to test all students no matter where they're located. So students that are in outplaced facilities, if they're on homebound, if they're under the custody of Lynchburg Social Services, if they're incarcerated, new to Virginia and the U.S., all of those students have to be tested. We actually ship tests all over the state of Virginia. If they are either on our rosters or in the custody of Lynchburg Social Services, we are responsible for testing them, and their scores come back to Lynchburg. So if we don't test them, that goes against our federal participation rate of 95%, which we have to meet each year. The question typically comes up about how do we compare to divisions around us or similar type divisions. This is just a listing of the three largest counties that are around us, Amherst, Bedford, and Campbell. You will see that their scores are a bit higher than Lynchburg City School scores, but looking at city districts, we are pretty much in the middle of the pack, and I have chosen just some school divisions that are either close to us or similar in size to us, which are city districts. Looking at subgroup data, which is what we are really focusing on now, not only with the federal system, but also with the state accreditation system. I wanted to give you all kind of a look at, over the past couple years, where the state has been and where we are. Currently looking at some of our subgroup data. For reading and math, the federal's calculations have targets set for you all. The federal target for 18-19, they're listed in the parentheses there by the subgroups. So you'll see, like all students, the target from for the federal calculation is 73. Asian students, it's 87. And they do that basically by developing a baseline, which they did a couple of years ago. And then they kind of figured out the pass rate then. And then they did a progression up to 3 years from now, which they want everybody at, for reading, 75, and it's 70 for math. So you'll see those targets there listed in the parentheses, and you'll see that we actually are having some growth in certain areas. Reading for us was stronger, of course, than the state. We are proud of the efforts that have gone on with reading, and some of our subgroups that we've really paid a lot of attention to and really tried to improve upon, we're seeing those results there with some pretty significant gains. When you see, 2 or 3 point gains, that's a great gain for us as a division. Of course, schools have different gains as well. And I didn't put all the different school scores in here, but I did want to show you the division that we are as a division improving. The math scores, not quite as much improvement there, but some of the subgroups we are seeing improvement. And again, those targets are listed there along with the subgroups. The writing results, this is an area where we are working really hard. One thing that we are noticing with our English learner population that we are having enter our schools now, a lot of them have no prior access or familiarity with the English language at all. So that's kind of a switch for us. We were getting kids in from different places that actually did have some exposure to English, and a lot of the students that we're seeing transfer in now don't have any exposure at all to English. So that's why we've got the newcomer program over at Heritage High School, and we're doing a lot of upgrades to our English learner instructional program this year. These are the history results. History results are not being reported for accreditation any longer. So we did not see the gains we would have liked to have seen in history. Wanted to give you all just an idea. Of course, we started calculating data back in June and July by hand, and then, of course, got the reports just a couple of weeks ago. But some of the things that we have done as a division so far, we were the first division in the state to get in contact with our school improvement office at the state level and to go ahead and complete the 2-day training to be able to use the new school improvement template tool that is very, very useful and really targets us on exactly what we're supposed to be doing as far as instruction and targeting our resources where they need to be targeted. So we have gone through the training we had about 55 people go through the 2-day training, started in July and did another training in August. So we're very pleased. We've got all of our schools working on school improvement plans at this point and then using this school improvement tool. Our supervisors, we've got 4 supervisors in curriculum and instruction, and they are conducting instructional audits to determine what's being used out there. We have found recently that a lot of schools are using a lot of different things, and what we would like to do is bring them together to have a little bit more consistency. So we're looking for what's working well in certain places so that we can study those best practices and replicate those in all of our schools. That way, if a student moves from school to school, they're going to have a little bit more consistency as they transition from place to place. We are in a math textbook adoption year or math material adoption year. Sometimes it's not always a textbook, but we will be reviewing those this year. We've already got teams in place, leaders at each school that have materials, and they are working through that with their teachers. I mentioned earlier about the EL students, the English learner students. There's a program called Elevation. We've had the program for about 4 or 5 years. It's never been fully implemented, so we are working to do that this year. Not only do the EL teachers complete the student plan on there, which is almost like an IEP. It's an EL plan. Not only do they do that, but they also have access to a lot of instructional resources. So if they're teaching a specific topic, they can actually get links to specific content, videos, video clips, things like that. So we're really excited about that. And not only will the EL teachers have access to it, but all teachers who serve those students in their classrooms will have access to that. So it will benefit the students that are classified as EL students, but also the other students that are in the classroom. Orton Gillingham Instructional Reading Training was held this summer, just July 23rd through the 26th for 27 teachers, and we included special ed and regular ed teachers. And this program is a very strong program that is known to really bring non-readers up to a reading level that is a little more in line with where they should be. Some of the trainings that we've got coming up, Level Literacy Intervention, LLI, some of you all that have been on the board for a while, this was put in place for our students who are below grade level. Our Title I teachers are typically the ones who are trained and administering this program. And then benchmark leveled library upgrades. We're trying to get some of our libraries upgraded, and with that upgrade also would be training, because we have had some turnover in staff since we first implemented that program. So we're working on doing that this fall. There are a lot of state conferences, of course, in the fall for different content areas, so we are busy trying to get teams of teachers together to send to conferences so that they can come back and share with others through workshops. Most of those are in the fall because, of course, SOL testing is in the spring, but we are busy getting people there. And then, of course, the elevation implementation, we're working on that as well. Our content supervisors are working on getting workshops together along with those conference attendees. So we want them to come back and either co-present or present on their own about what they've learned at these conferences. Student Services Department continues to be a huge support with the full implementation of VTSS, Virginia Tiered Systems of Support, to address behavior in the classroom and in our schools. And then we continue to increase the number of people trained in trauma-informed care to deal with our students who are coming in with some significant difficulty. Again, work was done over the summer. We brought together lots of middle school teachers to work on the new Middle School RISE courses in English and math. We've also expanded our educational software for guided instruction, ESGI. It's underway in our kindergarten classrooms. We had some teachers that really bought in and really enjoyed working with it. They're going to present to the rest of our kindergarten teachers so that we can expand that to all classrooms. And also the Virginia Kindergarten Readiness Program is, you've all probably heard of PALS, which is for the reading side of assessing students in kindergarten through third grade. This one is more on the math side, and it's created through UVA, just like PALS, and is going to be a mandatory test next year. However, we have jumped in, and we're trying to work out all the wrinkles this year so that we will be ready for full implementation next year. Another thing that we've done, we've shifted our November and March benchmark testing to September and March with using the student growth assessments, SGA. That way we can get data in our teachers' hands a little bit earlier than November. We had some complaints that's way too late to get the data in our hands, so we need to get that data in their hands earlier so that they can address the student needs and guide their instruction. And then just a few things that we're working on as far as next steps. Again, we're working to complete those school improvement plans at each school. The state will get ready real soon to release some very specific information related to SOL data, such as student performance by question reports, which is very helpful because you get exactly what each student was really strong with and then not as strong. So we're able to focus it by student, focus our instruction by student. The other neat thing is they give us some by teacher reports. So that gives our supervisors a nice opportunity to work directly with groups of teachers and their specific data from last year, and to figure out in a unit which person is really strong with a specific skill so that they can work in their PLCs, their professional learning communities, to support each other. We'll be working with schools to determine best practices so that we can get that consistency going between our schools. And then again, just a reminder, state accreditation and the federal support and improvement designations, both of those will be released on September 27th. And then graduation rates, I know some people have asked about that, those are released on October 1st. So what's happening now is they're continuing to refresh data, and as we find students for graduation rates, people that didn't show up certain places, all of that takes some time, and we keep refreshing our data so that we can make sure that we have the most accurate count for graduation rates. That's all I have. What questions do you all have?
I can see that you all are taking the information and trying to really make changes and keep abreast of everything. That's great. My question is, you stated that the federal scores were separate from accreditation. Can you explain that a little bit more?
So the calculations, the SOL tests, of course, happen. The way they're calculated by the state is there's a couple different ways. There's federal guidelines, which is through the Every Student Succeeds Act. They're calculated one way, and then at the state level for accreditation, they're calculated another way. That chart that I showed with the check marks, that typically explains why there's a difference in the two scores. So a lot of times our state scores are much higher because those students who may have moved in late in the school year and failed, that's not going to count against the school if it's the state calculation. So that's just kind of, it's the same tests that are given, it's just a different way of calculating.
And about consistency, yes, I think that will be really help, especially with math, because math can be taught so many different ways, and so that kind of can add to some,
Yes.
problems with transition, especially with students that move in and out in different schools a lot.
Yes.
I see a difference between different subgroups,
Yes.
like white students, black students. I'm assuming you have a plan in place to reduce that achievement gap.
Yes, that's one of the things that we've really been working on, just targeting the groups and determining where the weaknesses are. The reports that come out on September 27th will give us a really good idea of exactly where those subgroups are struggling. So we'll be able to put our resources in to help.
So let me ask again, so do you have a plan in place to reduce that achievement? Would you be able to share with us?
We will be able to share with you, yes. One of the things that we're doing is just targeting those students and getting them in with as much help as we can. So if a student is struggling in reading, we want them to access Title I reading services if they're available to that student in that school. That would be all of our elementary schools. High school, if they are struggling with a particular topic, we want to grab those students and get them into a project graduation remediation class. So we are targeting the kids that we are working with a little bit more in a more focused way. So we're searching them out. The goal is to communicate with parents to say, hey, this is where your student is, and we need your student to attend after school remediation 21st century. We need them to attend whatever programs are going on in those schools.
Kind of follow. The state pass rate, is it the average rate across the Commonwealth?
That is the state rates that I showed were the federal pass rates across the state, yes.
When I look at the data, I think Dr. Gupta was alluding to the disparities around the subgroups. And this board is absolutely convinced that you all are working on it. So my thoughts are not suggesting that writing, other areas, black students are underperforming relative to state figures. In fact, in many of the categories, we're below the state for all students. Some subgroups seem to be doing better than others. And this has been before us each year, basically the same. And you've shown some places where there's some increases and done an excellent job of helping everybody to understand that we're waiting on September the 27th that will give the true picture. But I would like, I know this board, Madam Chair, would not discuss this tonight, whether it be in our retreat or with our superintendent, who has brought the equity habits before us and the revitalized equity task force. I'm wondering whether we need a task force on schools in challenging environments with a focus as it relates to this board on advocacy and governance, not to include regulations, because we're not getting down into that part. But I'm wondering, what you just said, Dr. Bruce, are some wonderful suggestions to narrow the achievement gap. But I'm wondering whether or not a specific focus on determining at the ground level the root challenges of this gap, and to maybe assemble some folk together who are from the challenging environments. A lot of these parents do care. There are a lot of factors that will make a parent go to Saturday football or fight for their kid if something is being done wrong to them other days of the week, but somewhat intimidated to come to the school or to interface in the ways in which are being suggested. So I think that we need some folk to get together that will look very closely at this. The community resources are, there's a plenty of community interest out there. And I think it's going to take a warehousing of getting the community involved in a very aggressive way to carry out innovative solutions. But I'm wondering whether or not a group that could look at that for 60 or 90 days, because there may be some advocacy and governance in relationship to policies that this board needs to get more involved in order for us to see these numbers change. And Madam Chair, I'm really thinking about that. Challenging environments and the schools that are in those challenging environments. These students that are underperforming are not just going to perform better without something very different done. We may need new policies, new levels of advocacy to get things in place to make this happen. Under Dr. Edwards, I'm convinced that we're going to deal with it. But the Equity Task Force is so broad, and the way you have explained equity to me, that is so precious, of equity habits across the division, dealing with every conceivable piece which is to be looked at in every area of the division. I'm just specifically talking about a task force to look at these scores and to see what we need to do on the policy side, advocacy side, to help this matter and to see how we can get behind further community engagement, collaboration to deal with these challenges. I heard the trauma-informed care piece, all of those dynamics, but we've got to get down deep into that level and see what we need to do. Otherwise, Madam Chair, these scores seem to be fairly consistent from year to year.
Thank you. I do think I'm hearing from the Vice Chair that there's another topic perhaps to add to our retreat, if it's not already on there. Yes, sir.
I'd like to add another term of resources if needed to bump up, because issue I have is I know we look at the good things, but the slippage is where it happened. Some places we got a point lower, so we should not let it go further down. What is our plan in place to stop that seepage? So if resources are needed, a plan
For that.
in front of us, what are those resources?
I would like to reiterate what Ms. Carter said regarding the consistency in instruction, and particularly in math. If a student learns fractions in third grade one way and in fourth grade another and in fifth another, they are totally confused by the time they get around to what they're doing, and that's happening. So I'm glad to see that you're looking at resources as well as the best practices and instructions. Any other comments? Yes, Dr. Lewis.
I guess my concern is that there's a lot going on. While looking into the data, and it's been the case ever since I've been on the board. We had some good success with some of the elementary schools becoming reaccredited, but that took a real was a school-based focus and leadership. PLCs, I know, played a role, and a lot of things I think fed into that. But the flavor or the sense I get from your presentation, I know you're presenting for the whole division, but I get a little leery when I get a sense that there's this top-down approach that's going to get imposed on individual schools, and all the schools are different. They all have unique needs, and I know the federal government likes to look at groups, but I think the intent is that we look at each student individually, and that takes a real school-based approach. I'm not sure if the principals and stuff are, if they've been tasked, are they responsible for that? How are we going to hold? Not saying we're going to hold the feet to the fire, but maybe a little bit. And I know that comes out in the state results when you get into the individual school results. And the division is it's a nice snapshot, but you could have growth in one area in some schools, and other schools are falling back, and overall it kind of shifts around a little bit. But as a board member, I don't feel like I've got a real sense of where the individual schools are.
Yes, Ms.
You said if a student doesn't pass an SOL, y'all reach out to the family and offer support. What about for the kids that pass with a 401? Is there any support? We've got that group that's, I guess, average. They're not up here. you know, a 401 is barely slipping by, and I'm just wondering, do we even look at those kids kind of in the middle and offer help as well? There's not, I mean, it's a one question difference between a 398 and a 401, so had they not gotten one right, I'm just wondering if there's help for that student too.
Yeah, there is. Our 21st Century Grant programs serve lots of students. So it's open to students who are actually in academic need as referred by their teachers. So it's not just based on the SOL scores. We look at classroom performance. We look at homework completion.
But how is that presented to a parent or the child?
So
That's what I'm just curious.
anybody that's got a specialized program such as Title I, 21st Century, they definitely are reaching out in the masses trying to get students into their programs. Teachers are reaching out to their parents after report cards come out. They're reaching out saying, your student has weaknesses or strengths in these areas. We need your support at home. What can I do to help? We're constantly doing that. Our middle schools oftentimes have Tuesday, Thursday. Every week we give activity buses, and they are tutoring after school, whether the student's in a program or not, and that's more teacher-based. So we are reaching out to those students. The problem that we have a lot of times is the students don't stay. The parents don't buy in, and they don't stay after school to get the resources that are available. That's one of our struggles that we have. Transiency is another issue that we have, and that's kind of the reason why we're wanting to make things a little more consistent between the schools, especially 11 elementary schools. We have students that sometimes change schools at the elementary level 6-7 times in an elementary, academic year. They need to have at least the same resources, not the same approach, not the same exact materials, not the same, flavor for the school. But if a kid loves Study Island program in one school and they're doing really well with it, and then we take them over here and then they're doing iReady, and then we take them to this school and they're doing Ames Web, all of those things, kids that are transient have enough issue trying to adjust, and if the curriculum keeps changing on those students, that's something that we really want to work to find out what's working best for our students and getting that consistent among everybody. But yes, we're reaching out in lots of different ways, and we do struggle to get kids to stay if it's an after school.
I'm just worried about that, that group right there that's just hanging on.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not sure they get a lot of attention, and I think it's important that they do.
Yeah.
Ms. Carter?
Well, I think that I know one time there was a presentation from Mr. Rule of DESE regarding the Post-it notes that they keep on the board when they track each student's progress, and so I hope everyone is doing that, because that's great, and they were able to identify exactly what each child needs, and so to address the resources that way. The other thing, I always wonder about the kids that do change 6 or 7 times. Why don't we just allow them to stay in one school? We have children that are picked up from here and transported over there for a class. That's one concern, why can't we just allow them to stay in the school that they've gotten accustomed to, if we know that's one of the issues?
Dr. Coleman?
I just wanted to say thank you to Dr. Nilles for his statement a few minutes ago about each individual student. I think that is huge. And if little Johnny is taking a test and the scores are what they are, the scores probably are not going to change until that challenging environment is appropriately addressed. And it would appear to me that there's a need for collaboration, not just the teachers, but I don't know if I'm saying this so that I can be understood, but some parents really do care about their children. And there is something that's got to be worked out at that level. And so sometimes it takes policies, sometimes it takes resources from the community. There's a sundry of things that have got to happen. And I think if we can start figuring that part out, then we can begin to see these scores get better, because it is left to the casual observer. It would suggest that based upon things like race, that students just can't do any better. But I don't believe that. And so, again, these scores are consistently reflecting gaps. And very thoughtful about this task force that could get some experts to look at them. Not talking about spending their money, and then how do we then tackle the specific issue relative to this? And I understand it's not the
I
whole
kind of
thing.
see it. I'm hearing from all three of you that we want to look at individual schools so that when that information comes out, because Mike is right, you can do well at one school in one area and not do at another school, but it's the individual schools that are going to make the difference with resource and community. And we want to provide that, but we need that information. That's what's coming out in September. Is that kind of summarizing, bridging? Sharon?
One thing you stated was like the kids that we do try to get in contact with the parents and they are not staying for these activities. So then are we contacting the Equity Task Force to see if we can somehow find a way to engage these parents, or what do we do there?
So typically, if we've got a student who is habitually not showing up to a program that the parent has said, yes, we want them to attend, we typically either do a home visit, we reach out by phone, we try, if there's a coach involved, sometimes we'll get the coach to make a home visit with the school personnel, just to let them know that academics comes first, and academics can lead to the athletic side too. So a lot of times we're actively involving coaches. At the elementary level, a lot of times we're chasing kids down. They're trying to get on the bus in the afternoons. Sometimes we've got parents, extremely supportive parents, that will figure out how to get them right back up to the school if they show up at home because they know they're supposed to be after school. So it's that community support. One thing we've got with our Title I schools, all of our elementary schools are now Title I, and we have a huge parental engagement piece with Title I. So we're really working to get parents in or to just get them involved more with their students to let them know the importance of the academic piece that's going to hopefully get them finding a lot more success in school. So that piece, there's been very creative things done at the schools. There's been movie nights. There's been SOL workshops right before the test that gives the families little flashcards to work with their kids at home, and the parents really do appreciate that. It's hard sometimes for us to get all of our families in due to transportation issues, so we're actively setting aside money to provide transportation with buses. Our back to school nights where families get to meet our teachers and figure out what's going on in the classroom, the routines in the classroom, all of that, we're providing transportation for the parents to come in and usually feeding them and doing things like that. So we're working really hard to get parents in. I've always have respected Dr. McKendrick's statement, parents send us the best kids they have. And we've got some great kids in Lynchburg City Schools, and we've got some really busy parents in Lynchburg City Schools. We just have to figure out a way for us to work with the busy parents and to get these kids supported as much as possible so that we can bring them to where they need to be. Poverty, of course, plays a huge part. A lot of the issues that we see with our students that are not achieving are related to poverty. It's the transiency, it's the attendance. Sometimes they come to school hungry. We've got that taken care of in most of our schools, so we've got food for them. So it's a lot of the things that are around poverty that are causing some of our students not to be as successful as they probably could be, but we're trying to bridge those gaps and level the playing field as much as we can for all of our students.
Thank you for that, and I'm really excited to hear you talk about the creative ways of engagement, because I think that's really one of the missing links, is getting our partners, community partners, engaged. One thing that I'm also curious about, and not in an attempt to make more work for you and our division, but being creative and maybe going to meeting the kids where they are. So, for example, I know that there's a program running at Jamestown Crossing. I don't know really what staff they have equipped, but that's a facility that you've got a captive audience. A lot of the inner city community centers, for the families that can't get out or the children that want to go home, if we could maybe consider occasionally trying to utilize some of those resources. Plus, I believe that really if you've got teachers in an urban city, sometimes they've got to get out into the community and see where their kids are. So I think that might be another bridge to the community, just kind of sending our city out to them sometimes.
When you the next assessment? When will you be testing these kids next time?
We test, the bulk of our testing happens in late April and the month of May. So that's when testing typically happens. Our high schoolers have 4 testing windows a year. And most of those are for students who have not previously passed. They're testing again in the fall.
So, Madam Chair, to me, personally, this is an important issue. I know retreat, we have 10 other topics to discuss. I don't want to be one of those 10 topics. Is it possible to have a special work session where the staff can bring the reports and tables and work plans needed, so we can move on it now than later? So we have enough time to ramp up what action plan in terms of what needs to be done on the ground, as Vice Chair Coleman was saying.
Well, let's get the results in September, and then we'll have something planned. Yes.
And Dr. Bruce, you are doing an amazing job at doing your job of presenting us the information and thinking through all of this. And again, it's not just on you and your staff doing an excellent job. Dr. Edwards, again, I know we can't talk about it tonight, but I mean, this is among many of your strengths. This is something that I know that we can do. The conversation that needs to be had. For example, I'm not saying to answer it right now. A parent who just doesn't feel comfortable coming to the school for whatever the reason, do we know who those parents are? How do you overcome that so that the parent can get involved? If a parent is dealing with a drug addiction, it's going to be somewhat difficult for them to help their kid to do math or write. When you have an environment like that and you have situations, it sounds like we've got things in place. So to suggest that we don't is not what I'm suggesting. What I'm trying to figure out is whatever we're doing, how do we get it to move the needle, even though scores aren't everything? And if we could do away with the scores, that'd be wonderful. But the reality is, we're looking at it, we're looking at those gaps. And some of it may be policy related, some of it may be advocacy that we need to do at higher levels, some of it may be bringing those partnerships together. And I really think that that's something that we need to tackle, Madam Chair. And I know at the state level there is a specific task force that deals specifically with that isolated issue alone, and is soon going to be reported. It would appear to me that we need something like that here. However, the superintendent might think it possible. With regard to equity task force to the superintendent, I'm not talking about that, but I'm talking about we as a board weighing in to do our part to help.
All right, so jotting down some things that I'm hearing, and Sharon, to your point, we do try to keep kids at schools as much as possible. I mean, sometimes it's not possible if the parents are requesting due to transportation, babysitter, grandma can pick them right up from the school. But we try not to move kids, particularly if they're already in a challenging environment, so that they have that consistency in program. But it does happen from time to time that kids do move. With regard to what you talked about, Dr. Nilles, and having the building base, because we just had a district-wide presentation, but one of the things that we did in the reorg was really try to focus on that building-based leadership and provide that support that will help you dig deep beyond just here are the district averages and here's what it looks like across the division, but what does it look like in my building? And the thing that we do need to strive for is something that I would call authentic consistency, where there is a consistency of programs regardless of what school you go to, such that if you are that student who's studying fractions, when you change to a new school or even a new teacher within a school, there's an expectation that there is a common language that is used so that students are like, oh, I'm familiar with that, I understand that. And when you think about children in poverty and ELL students, how important common language becomes in terms of their development. So there's that consistency, but we also have to recognize that our schools are very different, so there needs to be some authenticity about them. What's going on at Paul Monroe may look very different than what's going on at Deerington, but the expectations in terms of the skills, the habits, and the outcomes that we want for children can be the same. And that's where we're trying to get, and you've probably heard me say a number of times, you can't fix what you don't acknowledge. So if you don't acknowledge there's a problem, it's pretty hard to put it on the table and fix it if you haven't at least said, okay, this isn't working, or maybe this is really working, and let's take a look at how that's working. And that's the level that we want to get at, where we have these conversations with our staff, with our building principals, with support staff. I think we need to go beyond the principal and the classroom teacher and look at every single individual in schools. Every single individual in schools are responsible for helping our kids, and we can't discount any single employee as their value in terms of what they do. So yes, you can do a lot of creative things in a health and PE class where you're teaching about fractions, you're teaching about reading. You can do a lot in the cafeteria with your assistants, your library. All of your staff can contribute to that, and that is the level that we want to get to for our kids. We do have to meet our kids where they are, and I know Willis is doing a lot of work on preschool, but some of these test scores, if we had a way of testing preschoolers, I suspect we would see some of the differences in preschools just on language acquisition alone, and just the word studies that happen ages 0 to 3. You'll see those differences. So when they do come into our schools, in some cases we already are seeing kids who are behind the 8 ball that we need to work with and develop. But if we meet them where they are, we can have a growth plan for them to move them forward. And I like to call the kids that you talked about, the 401s, I call them my border babies. They sit on the border. They can go either way. And I can't say that there's any group of children that we shouldn't be paying attention to, because our border babies, we need to move off the border. Our gifted students, we need to keep moving. It's not good enough that they just pass the test. I mean, they could probably pass the test without too much instruction, but that's not good enough. They have to continue to grow, and we need to involve everybody that we can. And I say everybody that we can in the process, because if you do have a parent or a family member or family members who are struggling with drug addiction, they may not be available for that child. So saying, well, we had a program and they didn't come in, or they're not reading at home, or they're not helping with homework, if they're undergoing their own struggles right now, they may not be available to help that child. But we are. And we own that responsibility for the parts that we can help that child. And we can't discount the fact that maybe you do have a family member who's struggling with drugs, who's just not coming to school. So what do we do differently? And I think that speaks to your point about what are we doing for those families, for those children. I'm a big believer that a lot happens, the magic happens in the classroom. It really starts in the classroom. We have some fantastic teachers who, and Dr. Bruce talked about, will be able to look at data based on teachers. We have some fantastic teachers who are moving kids, they're just soaring. We really do. And taking a look at those practices, and not just what resource are you using, but a lot has to do, how do you engage? How do you develop relationships with the kids? How do you get kids to believe in themselves so that they goal set and they move forward? We need to look at all of that in terms of, if we're going to do some really good work with our students, that's where we need to be. So our focus in reorganizing the division has been to have these building-based teams to dig down at the building level, because top-down doesn't work. You'll get compliance, but you might not get commitment. And what that means is, if you stop looking, people will stop doing. So you'll have compliance as long as I'm inspecting what I'm expecting all the time, but you get real good commitment when you build a solid school-based team where kids are part of that team, because you could have top-down with administrators and teachers doing the same thing to kids that we don't want the division doing to our buildings. So we need to involve our students. We need to involve our families in this entire learning process. It is not an easy task, and it certainly isn't a one-year turnaround, because if it was, somebody would have packaged that and sold it to us already. It is a lot of work, and one of the things that I caution sometimes when I look at scores of, this is how 5th grade did last year, this is how 5th grade did this year, those are 2 different 5th grades. They are two different fifth grades, and we have to be careful when we're comparing kids. I mean, if we're looking at children, how did you do in fourth grade? How did you do in fifth grade? How did you do in sixth grade? Are you showing growth or are you slipping? That's a whole different conversation than comparing different grade levels, which is what the data that we have right now, but to dig down and look a little bit deeper in terms of the kids' data on a little bit more personal level. I will also say, if we want to do this work right, we have to focus on it. And in school divisions where they're really doing a great job, that is their focus. They don't get sidetracked with a whole bunch of other stuff that comes across the table. They stay focused on the mission. So if the mission is, we believe that, reading is a gatekeeper to access all other subject areas, then we need to get tight and focused on reading and really start to build those skills into everything that we do until we get that authentic consistency. But it's going to take a focus, and often we'll get 10, 12, 15 different goals. We're not going to be able to do everything. You're not going to be able to accomplish 15 goals correctly. It really is funneling in on a couple things and saying, this we will do well, and this we will monitor with our kids, our families, and our staff to do that. And I think that's what we're committed to doing while moving the needle forward. And I've seen, just in the short time that I've been here, some amazing things happening in classrooms where I'm like, wow, how did you do that? And I really want to know how you did that, and how can I take the essence of that and move it to a place where it might not be happening. But I also have to have the individuals in those schools to say, bring that over here because it's not happening. And that's the acknowledge part. I have to be willing to say, what I'm doing right now with the students in front of me may not be yielding the best results. And I need help, I need assistance, and I'll take that from wherever I can. And I'm committed to really moving the kids forward. So.
Just a couple of observations. One, we know that these scores bounce around year to year. So some of it's just noise. If you see a slight improvement or a slight decline, it's just normal volatility. Second, leading into last year, we had higher than usual teacher turnover. We lost a lot of experienced teachers, gained some young ones. Sometimes young teachers can be better than the experienced ones. It all depends. It can, but I'd be curious to see, to the extent we can capture that in data and measure what impact that may have had on performance. And then again, to get back at, what were the things behind that turnover? Because it could be policy issues, institute retention programs for good teachers, things like that. So.
And going along with what Dr. Sinha said, we also had changes in the principals.
Yes.
It was a significant number last year in elementary and high school.
You need consistency in the people and the children's lives. And, to go to your point, I can't speak from data to say, why we have turnover, but it is something that Ms. G and I talk about all the time in terms of wanting to keep our staff. It's a huge investment whenever we're interviewing and hiring and we bring that person into the family, and we spend a lot of money training them. We want them to be successful. We want to keep them. But we also want their quality of life here in Lynchburg City Schools to make them want to stay here. And there's a lot to be said for families that develop within schools that make people excited about coming to work and enjoying what they do and feeling valued and feeling supported in their efforts. And we have to do that for all of our employees, all of our students, and all of our families. And that has to be a top priority, because it is anybody's ever sat in a classroom, it's a tough job. It is a very tough job. And it's not one that you turn off at 5 o'clock at night whenever you get home, 3, 5, whatever. It is ongoing. And we have to build that environment for our staff where they're not thinking about going to other places. And there are multiple things that factor into that. And
looking at Carl, I know what he would say is one of them, and certainly salary is one of them. But even working in a place, if you have a decent salary or even a high salary, if the environment is contentious, or if you feel like you're under a microscope, or if the relationships with your colleagues aren't collaborative, you're still not going to stay. So we need to make sure that we have that in place, and I know we do. I've seen it in our buildings where there's just wonderful camaraderie, but we also have to be mindful about everything that we're putting on the plates of our educators. I mean, if we want them to really focus on student growth and development, let's give them the time and energy, space to do that, and focus on that, and let's keep them, train them, and work with them and our families to do that work.
The last thing I would like to say, I know I've spent a little time on this issue, on all the others, because it's just that critical. But even thinking about how we welcome the students back to school, this conversation has led me to believe that we need to also do more to welcome parents back to the school year and to the men to school component, welcoming the kids. Point being that really getting out in the community and helping parents, I know we do it, but to have that reinforcement from the community could be very helpful, because again, a parent who comes to the school and the teacher is talking at a professional level and all of the things that go along with that, parent doesn't understand what's going on, how to handle all of that. I'm focusing in on these scores that are not where we want them to be, that we're going to probably need to look at that and make sure that teachers and parents get on a good start at the beginning of the year. And when we do get parents to come to the schools, that they don't feel as though they feel minimized and don't feel good about the experience. We don't want that, because we complain if they don't come, but if they do come, we want them to want to come back.
Just very briefly, I want to comment that I agree that the scores are very similar to what we've seen in the past, but I have to say I think that compared to last year's discussion, I think there's so much difference here. I think this has been a very healthy discussion. I think that Dr. Coleman would agree with me that I think every parent cares about their child. It's not some parents, but they all do. And I think that there really is what you've given us, Ms. Bruce, as far as what the plans are. This is such a much discussion. I think the last thing I'll say, I think there's a new sheriff in town. They have a new posse with them. I think things are really changing in such a good way that I think we always want to support that group. But thanks so much. Thank you for that nice presentation.
Thank you. All right, the next is, I need my glasses, the finance report. Mr. Beckles.
Good evening. You have before you the financial statements for the month of July 2018. Quite frankly, that's the first month of the fiscal year. Basically, from a financial perspective, very little happened. So there's no really content to the statement. I would draw your attention to the report on page 8 and 9. The revised revenue budget, that should have been pulled. It was my mistake. I didn't take it out of the report. But that is useless for the first 6 months, because at that point I don't know. The state money doesn't change until about December. And if it's going to change, we will know in December. So between now and December, I will be pulling that report. The only time I would revise that report for you is at November meeting, because we do the ADM count at September 30th. I see our next board meeting will be October the 2nd. And that's it's not enough time in us to get the accurate numbers. So at our November meeting, I would give you an update then on where our ADM is September. Because we have a trend where our number is in September to where it'll be in March, because March is the number we get paid on. So if that number projected to be significantly different from what I budgeted for, then I would revise this revenue report based on those new numbers. That's so you'll know where we are as far as the revenue based on the state funding is concerned. So that one really is a useless report for the first 6 months, but with one exception. If that ADM number is different in September, I'll report to you in November and show you what the numbers are at that point. Other than that, there's no really any content to the report. There's no significant issues that I need to bring to your attention at this point. Right now, I'm trying to get that annual school report finished, which is...
Dr. Gupta.
So what I'm understanding is this $53 million versus $50 million from last year. That number is not firmed up yet from Commonwealth of Virginia contribution of 53, 104, 855.
That's the contribution from the state of Virginia, yes, as of now. What they do sometime in December when they do the revised budget, if there's any numbers going to change, we will know then. And then beginning in January, we get updates on whether or not the state sales tax number, they forecast it to be the same, up or down. And based on that, we would adjust this number here. But at this point, the 53 is still the 53.
So somebody sitting out there looks at it and says, we got $2.4 million more contribution from state year to year.
This year we did.
So, but some places they contributed less money, other places they have higher, like textbooks have gone down from year to year.
Slightly, but the biggest reason we got the increase this year was the re-benchmarking. Okay. That is the reason we got the bump in revenue. If it was not a re-benchmarking year, we would have gotten less money, quite frankly. So you are right, we did get more, but it's because of the re-benchmarking.
I wanted one more clarification for people out there. The board has not approved the 18-19 budget yet.
That's incorrect. They did. They did before you came on,
okay.
Before the year.
So the 18-19 is approved.
That's correct.
Dr. Brennan?
Mr. Beckers, last meeting you pointed out that the 17-18 budget had not been finalized yet because you were still waiting for additional information. Will we see those results at the next meeting? So you said that the final accounting had not yet been done, that you gave us through June 30th at our last meeting, and there was a disclaimer there saying, don't take this as a final report.
The final statements for the actual numbers for
last year.
The audit field work is complete, but they haven't tied up they haven't confirmed our numbers yet. So until they do that, I wouldn't really say what the numbers are. But yes, you're correct. Hopefully by maybe now in September, by our next meeting, they should finish that part of the work that we are okay with our numbers.
Right. Thank you.
And I would update you at that point.
Thank you.
Questions, comments? Okay, thank you, Mr. Beckles. The next item is the consent agenda, which includes the school board meeting minutes from August 7th, the special meeting August 21st, the work session August 21st, and the personnel report. Before we can approve the consent agenda, we have to amend the personnel report.
So moved.
Okay, we have a motion. All in favor? Aye. Any opposed? All right, we now need a motion to approve the consent agenda. Dr. Gupta, do I have a second? Ms. Carter, any questions or comments? All in favor? Aye. Any opposed? No. Okay, thank you. Whew, school board reps, welcome. Would one of you like to volunteer to go first? Oh, okay, thank you. We have Miss Maggie Kicklighter from EC Glass.
Okay, so I put together a brief slideshow about what's happening at EC Glass and what is actually developing in terms of events that are coming up and clubs that are being started. So, yeah, thank you.
One on the right as well.
So actually, both District 6 congressional candidates, Jennifer Lewis and Ben Klein, are coming to speak at EC Glass during the afternoon this week and this coming week from 2:45 to about 3:30. And this is especially exciting because we also have started a Young Democrats Club at EC Glass, which there has been talking about them starting a club, but it hasn't been official yet. But we now have a faculty sponsor, and we are planning to meet with the Lynchburg Democratic Committee. So it's exciting that there are actually events planned. And then with both congressional candidates, obviously from Democratic and Republican parties, This is another way to encourage bipartisan events and works for a cooperative, like Democratic and Republican Young Democrat clubs, to be like have a cooperative project even in the midst of bipartisan stalling in Congress and bipartisan arguments that are prevalent in our own federal government. So EC Glass Theater, our director actually retired, and we're going to be welcoming back our alumnus Allison Daugherty, and she'll be the new theater director during our second semester. And a bunch of people are especially excited because she will bring a unique blend of Broadway and television acting skills, as well as her experience in teaching up in New York and the various other schools that she's taught at. And during the year, we'll be doing Dracula, Leading Ladies, and Hairspray for our total drama lineup. And then my last slide is about clubs. So currently, some new clubs that are developing or coming up, the Cubing and Chess Club, which a couple friends of mine actually started, is in its second year as an official club, so that's exciting for them since they are now growing and actually attracting more of the student body to come participate. And two students, Taylor Robertson and Alyssa Underwood, are actually making plans to start an environmental club at EC Glass in order to create awareness about environmental issues such as climate change and pollution within the EC Glass community, and also encourage students at EC Glass to participate in volunteering to help clean up Lynchburg area and contribute our own little part to the environment. And then the Chemistry Club is also planning to enter the NASA Student Rocket Fair, where once every month or twice every month, students who are interested will be able to contribute to building a rocket that will then compete in the NASA Student Rocket Fair, and if we win, we can actually go meet with some NASA officials and learn more about aerospace dynamics and also the physics involved with those projects. And that's all I have for tonight.
Thank you. Dr. Coleman wanted to know if there was a Republican club at EC Glass.
Yes, there is a Young Republicans Club.
Just so I get you the answer.
Equity, yes.
We have Miss Sedora Booker from Heritage High School. I'm just sliding back and forth tonight.
Okay, so Heritage High School doesn't have much going on. We're not really, just Heritage. So during the summer, we had our LCS Gear Up. We had them attend a Cool Speech State Conference at George Mason. And we would also like to congratulate our Heritage Yovaso Club for winning the Impaired Prevention Award, which our Yovaso Club is I'm not sure what it stands for, but it's a club which promotes safe driving. And on August 3rd, we welcomed new teachers for the class of 18 with a new teacher breakfast at at University of Lynchburg. Also, the Big Orange Monster Machine held its annual preview dinner to close out band camp. And we also had another successful LCS Back to School event on August 4th, where we have a picture of Dr. Edwards with our pioneer Pete. And during our registration, we had many food trucks, which was a big success. We had Blackwater Coffee, Lynchburg Barbecue, Uprooted, and Kona Ice. And we also appreciate Men to School for helping our students get adjusted back to school. Many of our students really appreciated that because not everyone really wants to go back to school. So with them being there, cheering them on, made everybody feel welcome. Also, on the first day of school, we had a PBIS assembly, which is our first pep rally of the year, and we had our alum Kiki Burns come and dance around and MC it. So that was fun. Everybody enjoyed it. And our Overcoming Adversity with Diversity Club had their first club meeting on August 23rd. During the month of August, everyone is coming back. Everybody is getting well adjusted. We have presented new attendance rules. And most upperclassmen are helping our freshmen and lowerclassmen to get adjusted because we knew as freshmen we were lost in the old Heritage. And new Heritage is just as bad. So we just had everyone help. And our sports team are hard at work. Right now, our cross-country team is practicing. Our volleyball team has a game tonight. Football is practicing in the heat, and many other sports are doing the same. And right here we have pictures. Our volleyball team is doing well. Our football team is 1-1. Our golf team, I'm not sure their record, but I hear they're doing pretty well. Our cheerleaders are cheering just as hard as they've always been. And our cross-country team, you know, I see them running all the time, so I just cheer them on. We are currently hosting exchange students from what I know. I've met 2 of them. One is named Paul, and the other one is named Natalia. Paul is from Germany, and Natalia is from Italy. They're both really sweet. Paul is a secondary kicker for the football team right now. And Natalia was in one of my classes, but I think she got switched out. But she's a really nice person. And for the month of September, the Booster Club, the FCA, and girls basketball is hosting a color-a-thon at Sandusky Middle, which is basically like a color run. So we're trying to raise money for different things at Heritage. And any other questions you may have will be on our website, such as like sports schedules and anything you want to know. Well, you guys should really look at the sports schedules because, you know, we would love to have you guys' support. Thank you.
Dr. Coleman?
Yes, I would just like to say to both of you, please reach out to our board chair, Susan Morrison, as you are coming aboard, because you have such a wonderful opportunity to help us to do what we need to do that will be best for kids in our role as we support our superintendent, and there are a lot of training opportunities and things that are available. So it's just wonderful to hear both of you, but please get involved and help us.
And thank you, Dr. Coleman, and please feel free to reach out to Dr. Coleman as well, or any of the board members or the superintendent. We really value your input, and if we ever have a discussion on a topic that you've spoken with other students about and you would like to share, we welcome that, because we've had some very helpful information from our past reps, and you do play a part in helping us make decisions. So thank you for taking this on. And as I said to you, you can email me if you ever have a question, or Dr. Coleman if you ever have a question. Thank you all so much. All right. Next, school board committee reports. And we will start with, before we go there, we have had a change in the Central Virginia Governor's School rep. Dr. Nilles regretfully had to withdraw being on that board, Ms. Mason, because of work. And Ms. Mason stepped in and said she would do it again, since she would also be the chair this year, which she had trained for last year. So and I think Dr. Brennan is the alternate for that still.
Correct.
Okay, which then we now have an opening on the STEM committee for a representative. And does anybody want to volunteer? Would you like to?
Yeah, I was there last year.
Okay.
I'd be happy to.
Great.
Go back and do that. Unless I'm stealing from somebody else.
I didn't have any other interest.
Okay, perfect.
I was waiting for you.
Yeah.
And then
Would you all just mind letting them know that so that they'll get me back on their list?
I
That'd
will
be
let
great.
him know that.
Sure.
And is there a volunteer for an alternate? You're going to be busy. All right. So school board committee reports. Ms. Carter, Finance Committee?
The Finance Committee, we're just looking at every way to reinvest in LCS. We're also looking at something I can't read, making sure that we're matching resources to the needs of students, and also so that we can really try to tackle this achievement gap.
Governor's School Committee, I think they're meeting tomorrow, so we'll have a meeting the next one. Okay. Laurel Regional School, Ms. Carter?
The Laurel Regional School is our first board meeting this year, and we had some restructuring. Dr. Ann Bennett will be now the regional chair, superintendent of the Laurel School, and the chair is Ms. Hall, and they're both from Appomattox. And also the Laurel Autism Program is up and is doing well, and they're enjoying that program.
Great. I don't think we have a report from the STEM Academy. Dr. Edwards, any from the advisory committees?
Sure. Last month we sent out a communication for anyone who was interested in being on any of the 4 advisory committees, the Career Tech, Equity Task Force, Health Advisory, and Special Education Advisory, and those are coming in. So if you haven't sent your letter of interest in, please do so. On the agenda tonight, you have the Special Ed Advisory Committee list to approve under Willis's direction. They are meeting on Tuesday, August 28th at Lincoln Middle. Is that correct? Oh, okay. From 6 to 7:30. So they're on the agenda first. They're going to have their first meeting in August, and we hope to have the members September. No, is it September or August? Your meeting.
The returning members invited your nominees to come to their planning session on August 28th.
August.
And I'll report to you on that when we get to that agenda.
Okay, thank you. August. We hope to have the. That's why I'm backwards. Thank you, Wills. We hope to have the members of the other committees up and running for the next board meeting so that there will be approval, and then we can have the meeting dates on there as well. Now I got the note. Thank you. The Equity Task Force has not met. School Health Advisory has not met. And I don't think the Career Tech Academy or advisory has met since the last board meeting. But we do have on the Equity Task Force, as part of the Equity Task Force, the curriculum piece, to go back to what you're saying. That's one of our areas of focus, so it's perfectly appropriate in terms of what you talked about there. And then after the next board meeting, we'll have the dates posted. I think one board member asked if we could have the dates of all of the meetings posted here on the agenda. We can put that on the agenda after everything is approved.
Questions or comments? Okay, thank you. Yes.
Just for clarification, was that for the Gov School Committee or for the STEM?
The Gov School is the reps, Ms. Mason and Dr. Brennan.
Okay.
And for the STEM, it's Dr. Brennan and Ms. Carter.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
Okay. All right. Next is our unfinished business, and the first agenda item is the school board retreat 2018-2019. You have a list of 20-some topics that you all have suggested. If there are any additional topics you want me to add, we're not obviously going to get to 20-some topics. What I would like to suggest is that you send to me and Ms. Spinner your top 5. And then we will put those top 5, and then we will make a list that we can perhaps add more to, and if we get to have some work sessions or another retreat. Does that work for everyone rather than sitting here trying to hash it out? Okay. Now, the real issue is, when are we going to have it? Dr. Gupta has reserved the University of Lynchburg facilities. Ms. Spinner and I went over there and looked at it. They're fantastic. They're places that people, if we hold it on the 12th, we voted on the 19th, and then there was some question about the 12th. College is closed, so we have access to more rooms and facilities. If we hold it on the 19th, the facilities are still good, but there'll be students there because they'll be back from fall break. So what's the pleasure?
I'm sorry. Which month are we talking about?
October.
October, 19th or?
12th or 19th.
Lynchburg City is out as well.
The 12th is fall break.
So is it good or bad for
staff?
Your staff.
We're here.
Okay.
Is there a preference? Do you want to vote? How many people want the 12th? How many people want the 19th? Want to do it that way?
I'm good either way.
I'm good either way.
Yeah, me too.
You're not good the 19th, and you're not good the 12th.
Well, what I'm wanting to do is go with the 12th, because I will get on a little plane and come back from where I am and be here on the 12th. That's my commitment.
Thank you, Dr. Coleman. All right, so it looks like it's going to be on October 12th, and we'll And we'll send the topics. I think we've started around 8:30 in the past.
Maybe a little earlier.
Was it 8? 8:30?
8:30. Started by 8:30.
8:30? Going once? Okay. So the 12th at 8:30, and we'll send out that information about where the rooms and parking and that kind of thing.
The matter I brought up earlier, when I was talking when Dr. Bruce was up here, this legislative advocacy piece, there are things on the books and then there are things that may need to be on the books. And when I was talking about that issue, I'm really focusing only on the governance and advocacy side of it. That is a unique piece to collaboration that I believe we're wanting to strengthen. And I think we'll begin to see some good results, because it appears to me, some of you have been observing as well, that other school districts get what they want when they express what they want.
Right.
I said that well.
He thinks he said that well. We all understood that. Thank you. All right. Any more questions, discussions on that topic? So let's set a deadline for getting your topics to us. Can we say by Friday? Thank you. All right. The next unfinished business item, Lynchburg City Schools local gifted plan. Dr. Edwards?
Yes, and at the last meeting, Heather Boyles presented the plan, and it is now, that was for information and any questions, and it is now up for action or any questions, and Heather is here too. Any additional questions?
Questions? Ms. Carter?
I would just like for us to make a true commitment to trying to enhance the opportunities or the gifted opportunities for the middle school. We've been asking for this for the last 3 or 4 years now.
Dr. Nilles?
Gifted, kind of in the same vein as what we saw with the state or the federal SOL results in the plan. There's a lot here. And so my initial reaction is, how seamless is that integrated in with what the individual teachers are doing day in and day out?
Well, a lot of it is already has been happening, and so all that I did was kind of restructure the identification process, because as I mentioned last month, when we did a holistic selection process previously, it's not objective enough. I can't explain it to parents. It's a lot of educational jargon. So most of the programming service pieces are pieces that we've been doing for years, with the pullout, with the Go Center identification, with the advanced courses in middle school and high school. Those are all remaining the same. But as we get new teachers in, or classes shift where a teacher hasn't been teaching an advanced course but now is, we provide the professional development, the training, the going in and coaching and helping those teachers understand what it is that you have to do differently for our advanced accelerated learners.
Dr. Coleman?
Dr. Copeland, could you, it has helped me to get a greater clarification, could you speak to, if not now at some later point, about the strategic planning piece as it relates to the comprehensive planning piece that we're moving now, that will help us in relationship to some of the concerns that may be on the table?
Dr. Edwards can speak.
Okay.
Well, I'm going to defer to Dr. Edwards.
Well, that's
I
fine.
was on the board retreat as a topic.
Okay.
Also, so I'm interested to see how you
Very
vote
good.
for that.
Well, very good.
That in of itself could take the whole entire retreat to sit down and talk about that. Yes, Dr. Copeland and I have been talking about the strategic planning process, and I think I might have shared with you, at least the chair and vice chair, and I'll probably share with the full board about planning a strategic plan, some things you have to do in advance. Right now we have our comprehensive plan, which is mostly our data, and it outlines where we've been, but a strategic plan is a little bit more all-encompassing in terms of looking at specific actions, timelines, probably over a 5-year period, because that's generally what I've used for a strategic plan.
with ongoing built-in report out sessions about your progress. It also is very community intensive in that you get the input from all of your stakeholders, your students, your staff, your community, your board, local colleges, businesses. Everybody helps you develop the plan. So it takes some time to put it together, but it is something that once it is together, it can help us stay focused and move focused. It also is something that in what we call high performing boards, they often refer back to it during a board meeting. Everything is tied to the plan. Usually that's the first question, how is this related to our plan? It keeps you honest, I like to say. Gives you some goals that you can look at and count on over a multi-year period. It is not just a fixed document in a binder. It's a living plan, so you might get into it and say we need to revise, review a section of it or a particular area of it. I will say that most strategic planning processes, one of the first questions they ask you is, do you have the capability of doing it yourself? That's a cheap plan, or do you need an outside facilitator, which is a little bit more expensive, and they can range upwards to $20,000 or more. And you know, since money is one of our larger concerns here, that's something that factors into how we develop a strategic plan. There's pros and cons to both, having an outside facilitator as well as working together as a group. But since it is one of the items on the retreat list, I highly advocate that it be in the top 5 when you do your top 5. And if I get a vote, number 1 is strategic plan, number 2 is strategic plan, number 3 is strategic plan, because I think that that will cover a lot of what we need to do moving forward.
Well said.
Any other? Dr. Brennan?
One quick question. Since our last meeting, a parent was asking about the depth programs at grades 3 through 5. Can you just help explain what those are?
The depth program is a pullout for our students who are identified in 3rd, 4th, and 5th grade, and that is a combination of students who maybe were invited to the Go Center and chose not to go, or students who just were below the cutoff for the Go Center. But previously we had no gifted services before, let's say that was like 5 years ago, if you were not in the Go Center. So I was one of the original gifted resource teachers, and so what happens is the gifted resource teacher, who also serves as the elementary instructional coach, collaborates with the classroom teacher so that the students who are identified as gifted are getting challenged in the classroom. But then the instructional coach also pulls the students out for at least 45 minutes a week to do an enrichment extension sort of class where they're learning more about problem solving, creative, critical thinking type activities.
Great, thank you.
Mm-hmm. Any other? Dr. Gupta?
You keep track of how many students wanted a particular AP class and how many were able to place them in the classes of their choice?
I do not have that data. Maria or April? I don't think that we've had.
If I want an AP math class and the class is full, is there any chance you'll say take an office studies class, AP, because the math class is full?
Yeah, typically we have some other options. So we have multiple AP courses. It rarely happens that we can't get a kid in an AP course. We do have virtual AP courses as well offered through the Virginia Department of Education.
So everybody is able to get the AP classes of their choice?
If it fits in their schedule, yes.
Thank you.
Any, Ms. Carter?
Just quickly, if you can explain, why didn't we pursue the career and technical aptitude and the visual and performing arts? Was that the budget money charity? Okay, so
I would like to on page 18, where once the board approves the plans are online. So if parents want to see or community members want to see it, you can go online. And there are also printed copies, hard copies, that will be in the school administration building if you want to come here and review the plans. Questions, comments?
I make a suggestion for the superintendent in terms of operationalizing this plan. The concern I have is the scheduling. If there are conflicts, how do we? I know if I want to take 2 AP classes and they're offered at the same time, and how do you mitigate that on an ongoing basis?
Welcome to high school scheduling. We
Yes.
have 1,400 kids in a building, particularly if you have singletons for AP. It can become challenging to try to move things around so that it fits everyone. Most of my experienced high school folks build the schedule around certain things, AP classes, singletons being one, and you kind of have an idea this class should not go at the same period as this class because the likelihood of kids taking those 2 courses is pretty high. But that being said, it never works for every single kid. It just does not ever work for every single kid. And we don't have the luxury of having multiple sections of every single course to the degree that it can work. We try our best to do the minimal amount of conflicts, and we do ask kids to give us multiple choices that they would like, but it does become difficult, and it becomes even more difficult if you're also in the band, orchestra, chorus, so you add other singleton courses that may be there as well. So.
Or if you go to the governor's school, or that becomes a factor in the schedule, and so you really have to work around those types of things. I think they do it very well, for the most part.
They do a pretty good job of making sure most kids get in the courses.
All right. Any further questions before we vote? Dr. Brennan?
Do we need a motion to
Yes,
approve?
we do need a motion to
Make
approve.
a motion to approve the Lynchburg City School local gifted plan.
Thank you. Do we have a second? We have a motion to approve and a second. Are any additional questions or comments before we vote? All in favor? Aye. Any opposed? All right. Thank you. New business. Lynchburg City School Board policy updates.
Come first.
You are.
So you have before you in your agenda the updated policy for regular school board meetings, which didn't have too many changes from VSBA. And then you also have from our last discussion, work session, the policy on electronic participation. And that is up for action tonight. Questions?
Question on the electronic participation. This is from VSBA?
Yes.
Okay. These edits are from the VSBA. We didn't craft these ourselves.
I'm going to defer to Dr. Edwards.
Yeah.
The way we have policy broken up right now, she's
Yeah.
got the governor.
It says LCS at the bottom.
The actual crossing out of the policy.
Well, I'm
if you
looking
look
at
it.
page
Yeah, gotcha.
79
Yeah.
in
Okay.
particular.
Yeah, we added in some of the edits when we met as a policy committee, so to speak, to clarify the language. And I think there was some conversation about defining what we meant by electronic participation. I think Dr. Gupta had some questions about what that meant as well.
So is your point that it should be LCS and not V?
No, I just, you know, in the introductory section, it says for purposes of this policy, electronic communication means the use of technology having electrical, digital, magnetic, wireless, optical, blah, 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 blah. The engineer physicist in me looks at that and says electromagnetic covers everything, and everything else is just echoes. And
That's VSBA, that's not just.
and so what I wanted to find out was who put that in there before I
Dr. Gupta?
gave him a smackdown.
We didn't do it.
The title is regular school board meeting, so I'm assuming it's the first Tuesday of the month.
Yes.
So if it's a special meeting is called in like we had in August, where will it stand in this policy?
I think we have a separate policy.
Separate policy.
I have to double check. Don't quote me on that, but I think we
The
do.
reason I'm asking is, in terms of making the meeting public, the regular meeting is being recorded,
Yes.
but the special meeting was not. So is that a policy not to record special meetings, or it was just a outlier observation?
We can pull that policy and just review it for you.
Good point.
for example, work sessions of city council, totally different bodies.
Right.
Are televised.
Right. Yes.
I think on our work session we talked about the idea, which Dr. Edwards mentioned. I think we wanted to talk about personal matter, and should we use the term extenuating circumstances, and we're talking about that being board member's job, military service, or family emergency requires the board member to be out of the district at the time of the meeting. I think we're going to make that, suggest that that change be made to that.
Where is that?
That is in that big paragraph that's all red. It is, here we go, it's B, let's see, what page is that? On our agenda is page 80. Okay. It's kind of that section B. It talks mostly about medical issues. And then the last part is if participation, the last sentence, if participation is approved due to a personal matter, the school board also includes in its minutes the specific nature of the personal matter cited by the member. And I think we talked in the work session about maybe making it a little bit more specific, extenuating circumstances.
You want the specific language
Yeah.
in the actual policy or in the practice of the policy?
Well, I will leave that to the board. I thought the discussion was we wanted to make that more specific so personal matter was not so vague in the policy, but I will certainly bow to the policy makers who do those sort of things.
We did have a discussion on it, but you always want to be as general as you can. And then the reg or the understood.
So the policy is general, but the regulation is more specific. Is that what I'm hearing?
Well, and that may only be applicable at the lobbying level, but it's easier that way.
So I'm sorry, does that mean there's a regulation that's written that pertains to this that will say those things?
I don't think we have a regulation for this one, but I can certainly, I don't think so, I don't remember pulling it. But I can certainly put the specificity in the policy if you want the specificity as related to employment.
I mean, I think this is for the board's opinion. I think the feeling was personal matter was so vague that would leave the board having to make a decision as to, does that mean if you're on vacation, does that mean, what does that mean? And this was just make it a little more specific to make it easier. But that was the suggestion, whatever the board would like to do.
I would support that with language, but not limited to, because so the things that you mentioned, but not limited to.
Can we just leave out the word personal?
Sorry?
Can we just leave it? We can leave out the word personal.
Well, it has to be, we were pretty specific in in our discussion about what would be, you can't be a planned a vacation, a military illness, family emergency. We were pretty specific in what we were going to accept for the times that someone would participate electronically. If I remember that discussion.
So does anyone have those specific?
Yeah.
But isn't that something we can just agree to? Yeah. Not necessarily, can we just leave this and we can agree to that?
Who's we?
The board. I mean, I think everybody can respect that everybody says, yes, we're going to agree to that. I don't think anybody's going to not do that.
Right.
I would hope.
All right, so I'm hearing two things. One, that we need specific language. Two, that we want to leave it general.
Leaving it more general.
With the understanding that...
Right. I mean, you're going to have the board has to agree to it. So
the board
even
must
if
agree
you
to the request.
Right.
All right, so...
I have what you wrote last time.
Okay.
Extenuating circumstances, job, military, or family emergencies is what you said would define personal, if you want that in there as personal, or do you want to leave it, as you said, just a general understanding that when it goes for approval, because it does have to be approved, you're looking at job, military,
or family emergencies.
And I like the job piece because I think Dr. Sinha may have brought up a very pertinent piece. I mean, so I hear your point. We did discuss that. Yeah.
All right.
My other question is, how do we? So this obviously will be a policy for a long time. How, as people go off the board, how is that known?
So related but not limited to.
I think that would be
extenuating
good.
circumstances.
That's
around
right.
Job, military,
There you're talking.
and family emergency.
Yeah, that sounds great.
That's right.
Yeah.
But not limited to.
But not limited to.
That to me
In
is.
case something else came up that you wanted to be
All
considered.
right, so,
And-
yes.
Well, with respect to his question, as new people come on, we do get the norms that we amended where there could be some, is there something in there about attendance? So maybe it could be tacked on to that.
We'll refer to policy.
Yeah.
The board norms.
And we have to vote every time.
Right.
I think that's whole.
All right,
what
so do
will
I
hold
have
us
a motion
accountable.
to, they want action on this. The superintendent recommends that the school board approve the policy revisions from the VSBA July 2018 update, leaving it as it is and including specific language in our norms? Is that what we're saying?
I think we're just going to add that.
But
No.
sentence,
Language
I
to the
think
actual policy.
we
No.
want to approve it with
Uh,
the language we just discussed.
All right, so
That's what she
include,
just said.
approve it with the language that you will read.
Right, so
Yes.
with personal matter related but not limited to extenuating circumstances related to job, military, or family emergency.
Yes.
Do we all have that?
Yes.
Yes.
So you want a motion?
Yes.
I move that we adopt, approve the revisions to the school board policies with the change in that piece that was just added.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? All right. Lynchburg City School Board Policy, BCFC, advisory committees to the school board.
Yes. So, again, this is the policy that we looked at to better outline what the 4 advisory boards do, how often we would appoint members, and then how often the members meet. And if I recall correctly, the conversation was also not necessarily in the policy, but at least once they get approved, to put the membership meeting dates on the agenda items.
Any questions?
Oh, sorry.
Dr. Coleman?
Could I have clarification on the language may have a maximum of? And in most instances, it's 20, one instance is 24. So what does may have a maximum of mean?
We actually were talking about that because we had a number, and then we thought, well, what if there are 21 people who want to, like, you want your committee to have 20 people, but what if there were 21 people? Would you turn them away? Would you turn away that one member? And pretty much we all were like, no.
What if it's 28? I'm in favor. What I'm driving at, I was under the impression that there was not going to be a cap, and I also recognize manageable dynamics. So I don't know if we'd ever get 250 people to agree to be. That would be problematic, maybe. I just wanted to get clarification. So it sounds like to you that you are saying that that means it could be above that, depending upon, yeah.
Interest.
So I support that.
Any further discussion? Questions? All right. This is for action tonight, so is there a motion?
So moved.
Is there a second? Okay. Any additional questions or comments before we vote? All in favor? Aye. Any opposed?
And I want to applaud what has happened with that, because as Dr. Nillis will attest, Dr. Brennan and others, we've come a long way trying to figure out how to best put things. And I really think we've come up with a very good way of having these advisory groups to the superintendent.
Okay, agenda item I3, Lynchburg Juvenile Detention Center Education Program Budget for 2018-19. This is for information and action tonight.
And Ms. Galloway is coming up.
Welcome.
Good evening. I really don't have anything to present other than what you have before you, and I'm just here to answer any questions you may have, because I do follow the superintendent's recommendation to approve my budget.
Questions or comments? Yes, Dr. Gupta.
I just want to reinforce there's no money coming from our general funds to that. It's all state appropriated.
Correct.
Mm-hmm. Additional questions, comments? We need a motion to approve the Lynchburg Regional Juvenile Detention Center program budget in the amount of $823,122. Second's been moved in second. Do we have any additional comments? All in favor? Aye. Any opposed? Thank you.
Thank you.
Always happy to pass out money. Okay, I4, school crisis plans, 2018-19. Dr. Edwards?
Sure. Catching up, and I'm going to actually turn it over to Dr. Copeland for this one.
So every year, towards the end of August, early September, we bring this to you. It's for information and action at the same meeting. The Virginia Code stipulates that the school boards need to ensure that all schools in the division have a crisis management plan. The timing of this year's submissions was a little bit unique in that the state requires us to verify that those are all done by August 31st. Which we did, and then we provided them to you to take a look at. And in addition to your ensuring that they're done, is to give you an opportunity to review them and provide any comments back to me. And several of you have done that, so thank you very much. I appreciate your attention to these and looking at them every year. They do get better, and it is a constant focus not only with our partners, with the Lynchburg Police Department, but our principals and their admin teams to get those refined and refreshed every year. So that's why it's on the agenda. As a public service announcement, I do remind you all that if you still have your CDs with you, if you'll please drop them off with me or Denise before you leave tonight. If you don't have them with you and you left them sitting at home, please bring them at the next opportunity, and we will get you off of the short list of folks. So I'll gladly answer any questions you have.
I just wanted to compliment you, Dr. Copeland, and your staff. The format for this was so much better than last year, as far as it being consistent and easy to read, and it was really great. I know a lot of work went into that, so thank you very much for doing it. I just have two very simple questions. Who makes up the crisis response team? Is that a individual school entity, or is that a district-wide entity? I just wasn't sure who that. I know it's an important piece of it. Who makes up the crisis response team?
It depends on the crises.
Okay.
So I serve as the emergency manager for the school division. So when we looked at the events that surrounded just the flood from a few weeks back, I responded with the city and called out certain people to open up EC Glass as the evacuation site to support that. In instances where we have actually done active shooter training, then our crisis response team might involve psychologists. It might involve reaching out to the clergy and the city. We actually have a presence not only at the local command post for an incident like that, but then actually the command post job would be mine at that point, and then the superintendent would go to the city's emergency operations center. So it's kind of determined based off of the need of that crisis.
there was a situation last year, if something come up in the school that had to respond to right away to decide, is this something we should do a lockdown or not? Is that decided? I'm just asking, is that decided at the school level generally, or does that go up to the?
That really is a school level decision. Many times that's in close communication with the police department as to what the threat might be.
Right, sure. And then one other question, which is just general, I think one of the concerns that comes up a lot is communication to parents and families if there is a lockdown or if there's an issue. And I know each policy states that communication is critical and it should be done, and I'm sure we do, but how does that actually work as far as what is the timing of contacting in some way families to let them know what's going on?
So the timing piece of it is the fluid piece, okay, because we have established some processes within the division over the past couple of years that the school's dealing with the crisis. They are in the midst of handling the students and everything else. So the information flow comes from the school division. So the public information office or the communications office will work towards scripting what that information release will be. I'll take a look at it. If Dr. Edwards is available, she'll take a look at it. And then we look at who we notify and in what order. So we want to ensure that the faculty and the students are aware of what's going on prior to notifying the parents, prior to doing any kind of a press release. So it really depends on how quickly things are moving or how slowly things are moving as to when that information goes out. We try to do it as quickly as possible. We don't want to get too far in front of ourselves and release too many messages, because then I think you get saturation from a parental perspective, and you want to make sure that you have all correct information before you release it.
Sure. And how does that information get transmitted? Is that a robocall or is that an email, or how does that come out?
Any version of those, you can do an email in conjunction with an automated message at the same time.
Okay.
So not only would the staff get the email, but then their cell phones might ring, and then the same thing on the parent side.
Okay, great. Thank you.
I think one of the concerns that we have, even doing that and having our robocall email, is we are not as fast as Facebook and social media. So sometimes we get criticized that, well, I found out about it on Facebook. So imagine just that chain of you might let your staff and students know, well, if they have access to social media, they might beat us before the parents, or depending upon where you are on the robocall chain. And I know it's fast, but it's not as fast as social media, apparently. Sometimes we have that, and even with the press releases, it just depends. So we're trying to be mindful about the timing. And as Ben said, I think what's really important, because sometimes parents will say, well, this happened and it's 2 hours later or 3 hours later and I'm just now getting the information. It's because if they are triaging something and we are communicating back and forth with them, we only want to send one accurate piece of information rather than what we know at the moment, and just making sure. So it's often not, and I know parents have reached out to me and said, I want to know in real time, and I just have to say, I can't make that happen for you in real time, to give you accurate information in real time.
Sure, that's great. Thank you very
Ms.
much.
Carter?
Well, I think Dr. Edwards answered my question. I know some parents say, well, I heard it through the breaking news, and they would like to hear it before that.
And sometimes if it's a police matter, if there's an investigation, the police don't want us to release anything until they are ready to share information. And that's hard for people to understand, that can't give out information too early.
Well, and like you said, most kids have phones. It's immediate. We can never be immediate. We're never going to be caught up with that, nor should we be, I don't think, because you'd give wrong information. So I think parents have got to understand word of mouth is going to go faster.
Dr. Coleman?
Madam Chair, I really want to thank my colleagues on the board who really took a deep dive into this and shared your reflections with us, and Dr. Copeland spoke of that just a moment ago. I also want to say that in previous years, you had to hunt me down to get my information. I gave it to you today, and you have it. What I want to ask is, in terms of the scrubbing of the plans, and I brought this up earlier, just looking at some state and national trends that are developing, do we have someone, it may be the police department, that's an expert in sex trafficking dynamics? And we're seeing that schools are the target for this type of activity in places, even in Virginia. Schools and challenging environments are near hotels and other types of places. The students end up at school, but they go other places other than at school while they're at school, and terrible things happen to them. Do we have any person who's a professional that looks at these from that developing phenomenon?
The police department's been very aggressive over the past 3 years in increasing their awareness for the community as a whole on human trafficking. And I know there are a couple of support groups and others that are out there that participate in that also. We've provided a few, hosted at one or two of, or both of our high schools, an opportunity for a community event. I know there have been several.
Yes.
I can check with the police department and see if that same detective is still doing it.
Well, I would appreciate it, and there are persons out there that are available. The middle schools seem to be where this activity is the greatest in various locations, and sex trafficking and human trafficking are somewhat of a different phenomenon. And this is real. It's something that we don't pay a lot of attention to, but it is happening, and it is heartbreaking. And we certainly wouldn't want any of that type of activity to be taking place in our school division.
Yes, sir.
Piggybacking on Dr. Brennan's question, I'm assuming we don't have a core crisis response team. It's situational. You're the emergency manager, and then you pick people as needed.
Correct.
But each school has its own response team.
Yes, I mean, these plans are all school specific.
So if you are missing in central office, you're here someplace where there's no internet connection, no phone. So what's the backup plan?
I'd say it's Dr. Edwards. And if it's not Dr. Yeah.
And even in communication, I mean, if our public information officer isn't there, then Denise is on top of the communication, so we kind of back each other up in terms of our roles and responsibilities in helping the schools.
Because my concern is if, let's say, for example, two of you are out for some reason, so the core of the communication is missing. So, if then else analysis, so what happens if that's the case? So have you done within the crisis response team sort of a situation analysis when the worst of the worst could happen? And then who will be, the chain in command up there responding?
Well, we haven't sat down to do that specific, the worst of the worst, as you say, in our crisis analysis. We do have protocols for when one of us or multiple of us are away from either our phones or our offices or can't be reached by phone, so that there is backup systems. And that's pretty much for almost everything that we do in terms of that. But specific to your question, no, have not sat down. Something worthwhile doing, though.
Questions, comments? We have a recommendation from the superintendent that the school board approve the crisis plans for the 2018-19 school year. Thank you.
I can make a motion that we approve the crisis plan for 2018-2019 school year.
Thank you. Is there a second? Second. Thank you. Any more questions, discussion? All in favor? Aye. Any opposed?
Chair, I abstain.
Oh, abstain? Okay, thank you. Sorry, I didn't ask that question. Okay. The next is Lynchburg City School Board Regulation JNZR, student fees, fines, charges, and tuitions. This is for information and discussion tonight. Mr. Beckles?
After reviewing the regulation JNZR, student fees and charges, we noted that we did not have a homebound fees listed for non-resident students. So that's what you see added on the bottom of page 95. The rates for homebound instruction. Homebound instruction is where we go to the site of the student. Elementary, 5 hours per week. High school is 10, it would be at a $26 per hour. And if there's out of zone mileage, it's 5.545 cents per mile. That's what would be charged to the non-resident parent for the homebound services.
Questions for Mr. Beckles?
We have a conflict here, so I don't know if Willis will know better. But homebound non-resident means if I live in city of Lynchburg, but my student or my child lives in Amherst, will they be classified as non-resident? No, it is not. Okay.
No, it's all based on the residence of the family.
Okay.
Ms. Carter? Good question. Ms. Carter?
My question was for the advanced placement exam, the fee specific reduced fee amount to $15. And when I saw that the last time I approved or say yay to this, I said, oh great, that's a great reduction. But then I received a email asking that we really look at this because you may have some students that take more than one. So that can be fairly costly. So what can we do to support those students with that fee?
And for families that have more than one
One child,
they're
yes.
doing it.
So it looks 15 is okay, but when you take more than one or you have more than one child, that could go for the $40 also.
I had sort of a similar question. I was wondering how many students, what's that sum of money that is used for that reduced fee? Do we think how much annually is paid for AP exams at the reduced fee of $15? Only about $5,000?
I have no clue. Maybe we can find out.
Okay.
That isn't the number I have on top of my head.
Right.
So the fee is to pay for the AP exam for a college level class that you
Right.
get college credit for.
Right.
Dr. Coleman?
Do we feel comfortable with our collection dynamics?
We are pressing forward with the collections. We've collected a good bit. I think in our next meeting I'm going to bring back to you, if you remember this. Oh, I forgot that one. September is the month we send that letter around the 25th for school nutrition. When our next meeting, I'll show you the drastic difference 2 years ago compared to last year. You're talking about collection efforts, it has been significantly improved.
But
that's good to hear.
To go back to Ms. Carter's question and Dr. Brennan's follow-up, if we have and we opened advanced placement classes to all students, how do we stopping that fee from being a barrier? Right. What money do we have available to help students who may need it?
So,
and how do they get it?
I'm no specialist on AP fees, but I did get sucked into this discussion last fall. The fees that you say there are only a portion of the total AP test fee. So the board approved probably 2 years ago or more an addition of an AP testing fee so that the students in essence had some level of ownership that they were taking a course and going to perform on the exam. That was kind of the way it was presented at the time. And the fees were set at that rate. I think the AP fees are over $100 a test. So that's how it originated and has been there since it was put in place. That original adoption in July of 2017.
Question?
Well, I just think most the students that are taking these AP exams, I think they're motivated to do a good job. I would think. No?
Not always.
There was some dissenting opinion from some teachers that was provided.
I would say that quite a bit of dissenting.
Sometimes people aren't taking it for the college credit. I mean, they really don't have the, if you don't pass it, you don't get the credit. And some are,
Some, and most, if you've got to make a 3 or better,
right.
3 or better,
So,
or a 5, and some colleges won't accept anything less.
So we ask people to pay $40 for it, and then the reduced fee is $15 per class.
Yes, ma'am.
Correct. And it's about $100 a test per student.
It's 94.
94. So, I mean, that's greatly reduced.
I mean, since I've been on the board, this one have gone from free to a part fee to, I mean, it's
Dr. Nellis?
It's kind of been all over.
At one point, we were paying for
100%.
100%.
And there was a sense that there was not. Students needed to basically have some ownership of that, and so we approved the reduced fee. And anyway.
Well, like I said, I heard from a parent that was advocating on behalf of some students who cannot. It's a problem. It's a struggle.
I was going to say, is there a way that we can get people like that help without having to say there's not a fee? I mean, is there some
Yes,
way?
there is.
That's what we do.
That was going to be my recommendation.
Okay.
Rather than changing the policy,
Right.
deal with those, I don't call it isolated, but less than majority
Right.
situations. You can handle those on an individual basis.
That's fine.
If you change the whole policy, you change it for everybody when everybody don't necessarily fit that same criteria.
And there's a financial hardship form that people can
Dr.
fill out.
Copeland?
So during last year's lengthy discussions, there was a process put in place that when teachers knew of students that might have financial inability to pay, that they would be directed to the guidance office, and discreetly we would figure out a way to help them. It wasn't going to be advertised, y'all line up if you got a problem paying. It was going to be handled very discreetly to help students that might have challenges.
Ms. Mason?
Thank you for that. I was going to add, that I hope that fees are never a barrier to anything that our students want to do. I do think they need to have some ownership, and I commend, our staff for allowing students and families to maintain their dignity and doing it discreetly. That just shouldn't be a part of needing some help, to have to deal with the stigma of saying I can't afford it. So thank you very much for emphasizing that.
So how does someone know that these hardship opportunities are available? And again, I asked my question about collection because, and I'm happy to hear about that, because it's no need to put something in place and then not collect it.
Correct.
And that's what we were doing. So we're doing better than that. Now, if we need to revise it, though it may impact everybody, we need to do that. Because sometimes it could be someone who will miss the email or miss the notification that you can get help if you need it, and therefore be a deterrent to their ability to do that, or the fees that are associated. So maybe we can't deal with it this cycle, but again, some of these things need to be referred back to governance subcommittee or whatever we're calling it, so that we're just not passing something along for the sake of passing it. If we're going to deal with it, we need to deal with it and then collect what we say.
Okay, any additional comments? Bob?
And this can be part of the discussion at the next meeting when we vote on this, but someone had brought up the idea of what we charge for lost books. And in the policy statement, it says, refer to section 4, and we won't need to do that tonight, but it wasn't really clear how that is defined. And the suggestion was we may be charging more for a lost book than it really is the value of the book. We just want to be fair with that. So if we could just look into that for our next discussion, that would be great. And if I missed it in there, I apologize, but I just didn't see it in section 4 anyplace. Thank you.
Okay. All right. Yes.
And is it possible for us to get the information about whether we're actually collecting these fees? Or do we know we're collecting for the...
I can assure you we are collecting the fees.
Oh, before you take the exam, you're going to make sure you...
Well, are you talking about the exam? I thought you meant fees in general.
No, the exams for the...
Yes, ma'am.
Okay.
And I do know that when students have not paid, that teachers have conversation with guidance counselors to find out if there's help available. I think teachers do a really nice job of doing that. Sometimes students just forget to turn in the money even though they have it. Dr. Brennan.
As I get older and older and more forgetful, is it reasonable to try to avoid this, the conversation that I will bring up next year about this 15 and have an asterisk saying that there's a way to apply, there's an asterisk that says please see guidance counselor in order to get that reduced fee, so that we know there really is a mechanism that people know they can do it, and when they come to do that, they can look at the entire picture and decide how they should handle it.
That's interesting, but we don't normally do that. Because I've asked a lot of times, how do you get this information? How do you find out about who to go to? And it's almost like we want to keep it here, so we'll discourage anyone from actually using those resources or taking advantage.
It comes down to engaging students individually in the relationship. And I mean, you try to put stuff into policy to capture every exception, and you're just never going to get there.
So it goes back to the relationship.
I mean, it's a balance we're trying to strike. So
there should be some way that you don't have to.
But this information should go out with your AP class, I would think. It should. Okay.
That there's resources.
I'll just share a small
absolutely
piece
should.
of this. Last year, I couldn't walk by an AP teacher's classroom without a whoo, come in here. We need to talk about this. And I have full confidence that our teachers hear from the students about any difficulties they may have, and our school counselors are the ones that took ownership of we're going to make sure that everybody gets what they need to take this test. And our counselors are scheduling the students into the classes. Our teachers are teaching them for 160 days, 150 days before they get to that test date. And I believe that they are taking care of our students and getting them what they need, so that when they sign up for this class, they can take the test at the end of the year and they have that opportunity for the college credit. I don't want you guys to think that that's not happening, because I know it is.
Okay, thank you. All right, any additional comments, questions? All right, let's move to the next agenda item. Special Education Advisory Committee 2018-19.
Mr. Morrison, board members, Dr. Edwards, as mentioned, you have in your packet the Special Education Advisory Committee nominees for the upcoming school year, and I would like to publicly thank Dr. Edwards for her leadership on recruiting community members and the work that your building principals did in knowing their communities. I just want to let you know this is the first time in 30 years that Lynchburg City Schools has had a waiting list of community members to serve on the advisory committee. So the advisory committee went through some training with me last week, which I have to cover confidentiality and regulations on how to respond to assist moms and dads in the community who have questions about special education. And they actively participated they're going to have October is Disability Awareness Month nationally, and your advisory committee is already working on that, and they are going to sponsor an evening on October 23rd where we will be presenting educational related demonstrations of a variety of topics such as assistive technology, and we'll get more information out to the community as well as to you all on that. But the agenda item is here for your approval, and I hope that you do approve it tonight because they're already working.
Mr. Vanderwerker, I really appreciate the efforts of Dr. Edwards, but I have to say thank you, because I know how hard you work with this and have for so long. So thank you. Looking forward to a lot more years of your leadership, Dr. Gupta.
You're an asset for this community. Thank you for all you do. Having said that, I know, Madam Chair, all these committees like Equity Task Force, they're advisory committees to the board, and they're very important. So how does they link to the board? Are there at-large board members? They're advisory. but do they just present report? Are there board members there required to be there to hear what the committees are talking or doing? You know, how did that island, committee island linked or to the board?
Well, and that was a question that came up in our equity task force committee. I understand that there may have been, used to be, some board members on the committee, but one of the things that we just did with the policy, change the policy to actually have the committees come and talk to the board and present information, share information as needed, at least annually, but it could be more frequently depending upon what's going on with that committee. So it's a way to keep the board connected with their committee. One of us sits on all of the committees. Willis is sitting on special ed, Ann Bon-Gentry and myself on school health advisory, Ethel and I on Latanya, Deja on equity. So you have administration on those committees, but they are going to start to report out to the board, which is something that all of the committees had not done in the past.
Dr. Coleman?
And to your point, Dr. Gupta, and as Dr. Edwards so eloquently explained, that's good. And on the board side, that's why I think when we get to the retreat, some of this will make a little more sense. There are policy, governance types of things that eventually get reported out from those things that we will have to address. But that's kind of where we get engaged in terms of dealing with those matters. And I just, I look forward to that. And again, there are some times where the board itself has to provide its own direction in relationship to what we need to do our part in being supportive of the superintendent. And that's where we have our little committees that we can expand under the leadership of the chair if we so choose. But it gives us more of an opportunity to do board governance and advocacy around real issues that need policy adjustments or new policies to be put in place to make things work as they should.
And I don't disagree with you, but my point is the policy reached a higher level. So it's like a baked cake, well designed, everything is put in there. But in terms of the recipe for the cake, that's what the committee is doing. Maybe we can discuss in our retreat, is it time to include board from the recipe time, not to when it's reached almost the cake is ready for the store display?
Because we went from that to no board members on the committees, advisory committees, but we can certainly discuss it,
I understand
the reasoning why. Yeah.
Presentations happen, but they are very formal, one way, So interaction could happen at that level, and that could be fed into the other board.
The advisory committees present as part of a work session as well. I think part of the struggles that boards have had when they have participated on advisory committees is, especially if the advisory committee is bringing something to you for a recommendation, then your governance level as that board is to vet it at that level. But if you're baking the cake, as you say, or selecting the recipe, then you're no longer vetting it at the governance level. You're actually down at the regulatory, I would say, level with everyone else. So, and that might have been some of the things that you all were experiencing with doing that.
Okay, I want
So.
All right, any other questions before? This is up for action tonight.
So, I have a concern that, Willis is running with a rogue committee here, so I move that we approve it. Hastily. He's a nice guy. So he carted off.
We have a motion. Do we have a motion and a second to approve the membership for the Special Education Advisory Committee for 2018-2019. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed?
Thank you, Board Member.
All right. I think we're going to need to start serving coffee at these events. All right. Superintendent's comments.
Well, I just realized that we are in September. I was struggling for a moment there with the dates of August, and we really are in September. So here it is.
couple things that I have gone to since the last formal board meeting. Last Friday and the Friday before, I got the opportunity to go to both home football games and, watch our teams and support them and the band and cheerleaders and fans. And it was just a nice experience to be out and to be able to wear jeans instead of a suit someplace too was quite nice. I'm really proud of our teams, and as my husband said, wow, both of your teams are really good. I'm like, yes, they are. So that was nice. On August 30th, I got to attend the Darrington and Heritage Back to School nights. Again, just being able to see families in a different atmosphere, in a different light, with no agenda, no presentation. And as I said, each school has their own flavor, so it was pretty cool to see the party going on at HES, and then I got to Darrington, and Mr. Rule was reading a story while getting a haircut, so it was pretty interesting to see, but great attendance at both events, and it speaks to what you say, that we have tremendous families who care about their kids, and they really were there. 29th, I actually went down to James Crossing. I think somebody mentioned that they have a program there. They do serve breakfast every morning there before putting the kiddies on the bus, so I was invited at a real early hour to go down there and meet the students, meet the families while they were having breakfast. I came back, I smelled like pancakes and syrup. It was great. But it was just wonderful to be able to see the kids, and I was there with the little ones and put the little ones on the bus with their families off to Heritage Elementary, and then I met them once they got to the school as well. And again, lots of family members out there with their children at the bus, giving them hugs and kisses and saying, have a great day, as they get on the bus and travel to their school. So that was really nice. Got sick, didn't get a chance to go, but saw some awesome pictures of Willis Tisch and Polly at the Poverty to Progress PK subgroup committee to talk about the ambassador program. So again, thank you for your leadership there and representing the division really well as we look at our littlest members coming into our division. I had my first principals meeting at TC Miller with all of the principals, and I think we talked about fees was one of the things that we talked about, as well as what I like to call the this. I charged each of the principals what are 3 things that you said, if we did this building would be soaring. And that's their charge for this coming school year. I actually put them in cohorts so that they would have to share their this with each other in their cohort. It helps with the accountability to say, these are the 3 things that you said, this is what I need and my kids will be soaring. Here's how I'm going to get there. Here's how you can help and be a resource for me. So we are starting those conversations about what are the good instructional practices, relationship building and monitoring that are going on in your school. So more to come on that. We had our last new board member orientation, which was the theme was community engagement and legal. And again, thanks to Jody Gillette and Cindy Babb, Ethel Reeves, and Nora Dunn for joining us and having a conversation with Ms. Evans and Dr. Gupta regarding community engagement and just some legal issues as well. A couple Saturdays ago, I got to hang out at R.S. Payne at the neighborhood meet and greet. Again, wonderful opportunity just to sit and have a hot dog, which was nicely grilled by some volunteers there. And by the way, speaking of volunteers, everywhere I go, there's a tremendous amount of volunteers who are just helping out at our schools. I don't want that to go unnoticed, whether they're coming out from their fraternities or their other organizations and groups. They're present, and they're doing some phenomenal work. So there were volunteers at both back to school nights and also at this neighborhood meet and greet at Payne. Another event I did not get an opportunity to go to, but I believe both Deja Warmack and maybe LaTanya Brown were at the Gear Up kickoff event and saw some wonderful pictures of our students who are excited about Gear Up for the upcoming year. And then if I go way back, we also, since the last formal board meeting, not the work session, had the first day of school convocation and registration. And boy, were those some busy days. And I did my best to try to get to as many schools as possible. On the first day of school, I think I made it to 8. I find it very hard to walk in, say hi, and walk back out, so it took me anywhere from 30 to 45 minutes per school because I get all sucked into what's going on with the little kiddies, and occasionally we'll just stop and sit next to the bathroom and read while the children are going in and out of the bathroom, and that line in the elementary school. But a great opportunity to just sit with kids while they're having breakfast. I love to meet them as they're getting off the bus. I think that's important, and you've often heard me say the first face of the day can make or break a kid's day in school. So usually that's outside of mom, dad, grandma, or whatever caring adult is helping you get ready. That's usually the bus driver. And a smile, a hello, a welcoming face on your ride to school makes a huge difference. And once they get into the buildings, boy, are they lined up for just staff member to staff member to staff member, taking care of them, making sure they have breakfast. So it's a wonderful teen event. But I'm super excited about the start of the year and having the opportunity to lead and do so many wonderful things. Coming up this Friday is Get Downtown, so that sounds exciting, except for some reason I have Get Out of Town because I won't be here on Thursday and Friday. I have to travel back to New Jersey, so looking forward to hearing about those wonderful things. We also have more back-to-school nights coming up at the various schools, so please take an opportunity to visit our schools and see the wonderful things that we're doing. And then I have special awards. Special time, if I can find my special awards. I was super organized. Oh, here we go. Until right now. So it seems like teachers and students aren't the only ones doing a whole bunch of learning. So I have some special awards for my board members. From VSBA, they have their academy at award levels, and I have a certificate of recognition for 15 credits of study for Dr. Brennan. There you go. All right. I have also in my bag of goodies, let's see here, for Dr. Sinha, this is the Bronze Award for 24 credits of studies, and it comes with a nice bronze pen. And also for Mrs. Morrison, you too get the Bronze Award. There you go. Okay, 48 credits in a 2-year period is the Silver Award, and I have a Silver Award for Mrs. Mason. There you go. And also for Mrs. Carter. Oh, Miss Carter. And then they have this special award called Distinctive Starfish. Starfish. This is for 84 credits of study, board member attending workshops. And for 84 credits in 2 years goes to Dr. Coleman. Wow. So congratulations. Wow. And that just goes to show that learning continues, not just from my little ones, but from my big ones too here on the board. So thank you for your service and your time and everything that you do for our students. All right, board comments? Dr. Brennan?
I'd like to thank Dr. Edwards and her staff for putting together the new orientation for the board members, which was 3 2-hour sessions. It was a huge commitment, both by the new board members as well as the staff. Thank you so much for doing that. I'd also like to thank Dr. Edwards and staff for the work session that we had several weeks ago, which I thought was really very productive, talking about recess time and other issues. I'd love to sort of maybe propose in some way to the board that maybe another topic for the work session could be the STEP process. I've heard multiple speakers talk to us about the STEP process. I still don't understand the STEP process. I'd love to have an explanation of that, and I know other board members would like to do that too, but maybe that could be a topic for a work session. And then lastly, sort of a personal note, my wife and I have assumed the legal guardianship for 2 of my wife's nieces from North Carolina, who are now 9th and 10th graders at EC Glass. So after our children leaving 10 years ago from Glass, we're back. We really appreciate the EC Glass staff. They have welcomed those 2 young women wonderfully, and we're looking forward to working with them if I can figure out the portal and these other IT things I'm not used to. But thank EC Glass for being so welcoming to them. We appreciate it.
I can help you with that.
Good. Thank you.
Any other comments? Dr. Gupta?
Go ahead.
I just thought the convocation was the best ever. I just thought it was amazing. And we see a lot of innovative convocations going on around the Commonwealth. But Dr. Edwards and your team, that was, and Dr. Morris and wow. Dr. Copeland, all of you, that was something.
Madam Chair, I know we have talked about it. We in the Finance Committee too. I like this board to set. We have these teachers come every time talk about salary raises to set a goal for raise for next year, so they are not felt like it's a leftover in the budget. It's the priority in incoming, not the leftover money is used for the salary raises. So it should be. I know the budget for 2018 was approved before new members joined, but it needs to be a forefront priority and it should be public priority. So people should know what our goal as a board is for this upcoming hour. It's not in January or February, we'll let you know what the raise will be. It should be up now and then should be discussed and articulated and managed as we move along with the year.
Thank you for that. Any other comments? I have a few reminders. The 2018 VSBA Annual Convention in Williamsburg is coming up. That will be November the 14th is the early bird session, and it goes till Friday the 16th. We have a group of rooms booked at where we're staying, and we need to release those rooms. So if you check your calendars and let Ms. Spinner know whether or not I'm planning on going. I know Ms. Carter and Dr. Coleman are planning on going. But if any of the others are going, we need to do that, and because we need to register and we need to make sure those rooms are secured. We have our, in September 21st, we have our governance training, and please remember to complete that survey. It's due by September 10th. I've looked at it a couple times.
I've done that.
I know, but
that's not a very good example.
It's not. I'll do it, but maybe we better talk to them about that survey. I know that Ms. Carter and Dr. Coleman and I are traveling on the 20th to Charlottesville for Safe School and other training at legislative advocacy. And Ms. Carter and I are going with Dr. Edwards for a superintendent evaluation workshop. So we are going up and down the road to Charlottesville, get some things done. Our next board meeting's Tuesday, October 2nd at 5:30 p.m. With that, we are adjourned.
Thank you.
I gave you mine. I feel good about that because